Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 77th anniversary of the Lingayen Gulf Landings. To begin, we have the Administrator of the Philippine Veterans Affairs Office to provide us with his message on this historical day.
We commemorate the 77th anniversary of the Lingayen Gulf Landing of the Allied Forces during the Second World War. This significant event, a turning point in our fight against the foreign oppressors, signaled the beginning of the retaking of Luzon from Japanese occupation. More than a strategic military operation, the Lingayen Gulf Landing also signifies the unwavering efforts of our Filipino guerrilla fighters to keep the Filipino resistance alive and strong during the 3 years of Japanese occupation. The return of the Allied forces to the Philippines was eagerly anticipated by Filipinos during the war. The landing, after all, meant increased friendly forces in Luzon that hastened the liberation of the country. After a series of surgical air and naval bombardments, the Allied forces finally landed successfully in Lingayen Gulf to achieve several objectives. Strategically located vis-à-vis the enemy's center of gravity, the Allied forces were able to establish a base of operations and secure foothold in Luzon to easily advance to Manila and regain control over the capital. However, it is the strong resistance of the Filipino guerrilla fighters, even before the Allied forces returned, that made the difference. The Filipino fighters, known throughout the world as the bravest, were not just idly waiting for help to come. Instead, they were attacking enemy camps, leading ambushes, gathering intelligence, and rescuing prisoners of war. All this they did despite serious logistical constraints and the risk of being captured, tortured, and killed by the enemy. According to records, when General Douglas MacArthur landed with the American troops, the Japanese Imperial forces were in control of only 12 out of the 48 provinces in the country. This can be attributed to the Filipino fighters who continued to mount fierce guerrilla warfare and effective underground work. They continuously recruited men and women and gained support from fellow Filipinos for their cause. From the start of the war in 1942 until the days leading to the return of the Allied forces, many of the guerrilla troops were in contact with the U.S. military. They were able to supply vital intelligence information on the Japanese disposition of forces and operations, and give updates and request assistance whenever needed. As a result, by the time our Allied forces arrived in Lingayen, the Philippines was capable and ready. In fact, the efforts of the guerrilla fighters assured the success of the landings at Lingayen Gulf. Despite non-stop attacks from kamikaze suicide bombers during the landings, the troops prevailed and 68,000 up to 200,000 men landed within the next few days, meeting no stiff resistance on the coast of Lingayen. Eventually, the combined forces of Filipino and American troops were able to expel the Japanese Imperial forces thereby restoring the country's peace and dignity. Today, as we remember this significant moment in our history, we honor our veterans for their unfaltering courage that became the hallmark of our country. It is, after all, their bravery and their love of country that fueled their fight for freedom and independence. As Filipinos who inherited the future which our defenders fought for, it behooves us all to exemplify their heroic deeds in our daily lives. Now that we are facing a different kind of battle against an unseen but equally ferocious enemy, the COVID-19 pandemic, may we also be able to rise above ourselves and exude the same unity of purpose and readiness for selfless sacrifice to achieve victory. Once again, we thank our Pangasinense veterans for their sacrifices during the war. We shall forever be grateful for your service to the nation and to the future generation. Mabuhay ang mga veterano, mabuhay ang mga Pilipino.
Thank you very much, Yusek Carolina. Now, to give us a short narrative of what transpired on this day 77 years ago, here's an audio-visual presentation prepared by the PVAO Public Affairs Office. Let us all watch. This time around, let us have the President of the Veterans Federation of the Philippines, Colonel Cesar P. Pobre, for his message.
On the occasion of the 77th anniversary of the American Forces landing on Lingayen, I would like to greet everyone a very Merry Christmas, a very prosperous New Year, and a very happy Three Kings. And to begin with, on 9 January 1945, after neutralizing stiff Japanese opposition in Leyte and with Mindoro now in American hands, the U.S. Sixth Army, led by Lieutenant General Walter Kruger, made landings on Lingayen, Pangasinan, not far from where the Japanese landed in December 1941. Lingayen was chosen for it not only had enough room for large bodies of troops, also there were the highways nearby to facilitate military operations to the Central Plains and Manila. Allied warships, as was their wont, conducted a pre-invasion bombardment before the troops landed. This they did, despite the fact that Filipino guerrillas had earlier reported that there were no Japanese in the landing area and that those present were but a motley crowd which had formed for a victory parade, complete with Filipino and American flags and a musical band. Instead of fighting in the beaches, they had chosen to fight in the mountainous areas. The choice was in keeping with the plan of General Tomoyuki Yamashita, who, because of being reputedly the best Japanese military tactician and in fact called the Tiger of Malaya for his blitzkrieg conquest of Malaya in the early days of World War II, was selected to take charge of the defense of the Philippines by the Japanese. In view of his combat force, Yamashita opted not to bring the fight to the Americans, especially in the beaches and the open fields, where they could put to advantage their tremendous firepower. Rather, he would wait for the Americans to continue to come to him in the wooded, rugged uplands, particularly in the Cordilleras of northern Luzon. In those mountainous areas, he reasoned, he could fight with the benefit of cover, concealment, and fighting from the top, bleed his opponents as much as can be, and tie down so many of them as could possibly pulled out for more profitable employment elsewhere in other places. Yamashita had planned for a protracted defense in order to disrupt the Allied timetable of invading the Japanese homeland. The 9th of December 1945 was also the start of the all-out offensive of the USAFIP-NL, or United States Armed Forces in the Philippines, Northern Luzon. This was the guerrilla organization formed by Ilocanos, Ibanags, Igorots, and other inhabitants of the area. It arose in the early days of the Japanese invasion and continually harassed the invaders and occupants with ambuscades, raids, and sabotages as their primary means. Their focus, however, was collection of intelligence as desired by the Southwest Pacific Area Command of General MacArthur. For 218 days, since 9 December, the USAFIP-NL, now 20,000 strong, fought as an independent military unit while being attached to one of the major U.S. 6th Army divisions. It attacked Yamashita's flanks and rears, decimating his troops in the process. A case in point was their action to forcibly open his sensitive avenue of approach to his rear, the rugged and mountainous Besang area of Cervantes, Ilocos Sur. Excuse me. When the use of NL threatened to attack this backdoor of Yamashita, he ordered Lieutenant General Osaki's crack 23,500 strong 19th Tora Division to plug it. But by mid-June 1945, after 4 months of almost ceaseless, fierce and hard, close and frequent hand-to-hand fighting, the soldiers of the land of the rising sun, with heavy losses, withdrew southward, only to be hotly pursued, particularly by the USAFIP NL's 66th Infantry Regiment that was staffed mostly by the Igorots or natives of the area. In no time, they came up to the American forces advancing up north from Baguio, while other USAFIP NL units first moved eastward to capture Sabangan, Buntok, and the nearby towns before driving south to effect junction with their 65th Infantry comrades and the American forces. Their convergence would further tighten the enemy's defense cordon and clear all approaches from the north and west side of the enemy defense positions. By 15 August, the use of NL and American units had advanced to within 5 miles of Yamashita's headquarters in the Asin Valley of Kiangan, Ifugao. But when they were just about to deliver the coup de grace, the knockout blow, the bell rang, so to speak, and Yamashita, together with his men, was saved. Emperor Hirohito had ordained Japan's surrender, and so all its fighting forces were directed to cease fire and lay down their arms. 16 days later, Lieutenant Macario Alvaradillo of the USAFIP NL's 14th Infantry Regiment, which had since been operating in Isabela and Nueva Vizcaya, got in contact with Yamashita's headquarters. Then, on 2 September 1945, Yamashita and his staff came out from their hideouts and briskly walked with the awaiting Americans to the vehicles that brought them down to the airstrip of Bagabag, Nueva Vizcaya. They were then flown to the USAFIP-NL headquarters at Darigayos, a barrio of Luna, La Union. From Darigayos, Yamashita and his staff were taken to Baguio by jeeps with American military police escorts. At Baguio, General Yamashita and Admiral Denhichi Okochi signed the formal instrument surrendering respectively all army and naval forces under their command. One of those seated at the surrender table was Colonel Russell Voknan, the USAFIP-NL commander. He was given that privilege apparently in recognition of the major role played by the Filipino guerrillas in the triumphant military operations against the Japanese in northern Luzon. In fact, it was no less than Lieutenant General Walter Kruger, the commander of the U.S. Sixth Army, who, in appreciation of their commendable participation, said that without the Filipino guerrillas, it would have been necessary for him to employ an additional 2 or more divisions to bring the Northern Luzon military operations to a successful end. Indeed, they did their job in record time, even while fighting simply as foot soldiers with only a battalion of artillery supporting them. With valor and fortitude, so characteristic of the Filipino fighting tradition, men of the USAFIP-NL slugged it out with the Japanese warriors toe to toe and tooth and nail. At the airport capital town of Lawag, Ilocos Norte, the seaport town of Cabugao, Ilocos Sur, the mountain peak called Tangadan of San Quintin Abra, the air and seaport capital town of San Fernando La Union, the best-sung area of Cervantes, Ilocos Sur, as cited earlier, the Lepanto Mangkayal mining area of Benguet, Mayuyao and Banawe, Ifugao, and many other places. The Filipino freedom fighters wrote in blood, sweat, and tears their story. It is a story so remarkable, so inspiring, that it has to be told. It has to be told so that the present and future generations will be instilled with the pride and the consciousness that they are the scions of Filipinos who knew how to love their country and people, the Philippines and the Filipino people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, President Pobre. Next to give his message is the Mayor of the Municipality of Lingayen, Honorable Leopoldo N. Batawi.
Heroism is something that has to be remembered, taught, and understood. Mindful of these things, I offer my snappiest salute to the Philippine Veterans Affairs Office, the PVAO, and to the province of Pangasinan for continually commemorating the anniversary of the Lingayen Gulf Landings, as I was myself part of the uniformed service, working hand in hand with the military. I fully understand and value the sacrifices and courage of our war veterans for the sake of our country and of our people. Their selfless dedication to liberate our country and secure our own sovereignty is worthy of everyone's great appreciation. Thus, when I was a congressman, I made sure to take the opportunity to campaign for the passage of the law 114-265, the Filipino Veterans of World War II Congressional Gold Medal Act of 2015 by the U.S. Congress, and lead the enactment of the Filipino Veterans Equity Compensation Act of 2009. Hence, increasing the monthly old age pension of World War II veterans from 5,000 to 20,000. While this, just as our event today, may not sufficiently and substantially equate to the deeds of the war veterans, they are indicative of our respect to the Second World War II heroes. More so, the 77th anniversary of the historic landings being observed despite the pandemic manifests our nation's efforts, especially through the vow to perpetuate the patriotism of our war veterans. From our end, the capital town where the historic landings transpired, utmost support to such advocacy is likewise guaranteed. It is then my prayer that the youth of today truly learn of this heroism. More so, I ardently hope that all of us value what the war veterans had fought for our genuine freedom. May this commemoration be ever meaningful, and may God bless us all. Thank you.
And that concludes our short virtual commemoration of the 77th anniversary of the Lingayen Gulf Landings. I am Felicia Lois Lanya. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, and stay safe, everyone.